So today we're going to be presenting on um, ReShare's first national implementation, especially in Australia. So let me just first, in Australia, we do an acknowledgement of country, and we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of the lands on which CAVAL and its officers and Sean and I are both based on today. We'd like to pay our respects to elders past and present, and would like to extend that welcome to all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and other First Nations peoples that are joining us today. So just to quickly go through the agenda, I'm going to quickly go through who we are, the project overview. We'll talk a little bit about design, the end product, the stats, because stats are cool, and the next steps for us all. So the people that are presenting today is Mallory, Library Services Analyst from Index Data, myself, the Deputy CEO of CAVAL, and Sean Brady, the Manager of Product. We were essentially the mainstays for the project that implemented this from the support and infrastructure perspective. We'd like to do a shout out to the Trove folks at the National Library that just went above and beyond to make sure that this took off as well. But I don't know, they're not here today. So hopefully they'll see a recording of this. So shout out to them. But quickly, who is CAVAL? Because I figured most of you know who Index Data is, but CAVAL is a not-for-profit library organisation that's owned by the universities in the state of Victoria in Australia. And we provide a number of shared infrastructure services, and we're actually established over 40 years ago around making sure that we can do things more efficiently and effectively across universities rather than having to duplicate effort. So we first started with a shared storage facility. We also had a shared catalogue, shared reciprocal borrowing, interlibrary loans, as well as areas around capability development. So that's training, labour hire, and a mentoring program. We also provide consultancy services, and also to public libraries, we actually import books in languages other than English and provide them to public libraries so that we can actually ensure the sustainability of languages that aren't in English. And then we also provide shared infrastructure for libraries all across Australia and New Zealand around ReShare's, skill type, and the journal usage statistics platform on behalf of JISC. But who is CAVAL and Index Data? So Peter might actually recognize this. This was I met Peter back in 2017. You can see that we're super popular with the 4 retweets that we've got there and the 3 likes. We had actually come together to talk about open source and the importance of it in the library space way back when Folio was just sort of starting off. And this is when CAVAL really became interested in the open source space and how we could provide shared infrastructure in Australia. And this is sort of how we've met up. And ever since, CAVAL has been hosting our Folio instance because we have our own collection with Index Data. And now we've partnered to do ReShare. And so what is Trove? Trove is a single point to the treasure trove that is all things Australian. So there's about 14 billion digital items within the catalogue itself, but also Trove is a connection to Trove partners, and that's all the libraries within Australia. And there's hundreds of them. And the National Library is actually the host to Trove and allows for libraries to come together, share its resources, and provides a shared national catalogue and also resource sharing infrastructure. So why are we here? The national service was completely integrated into the National Bibliographic Database, and they wanted to create a service that allowed for a reciprocal model of interlibrary loans. The system beforehand was being sunsetted, and they needed to look for something new and something a little bit different. They also needed something that allowed for the ability for subgroups, automated load balancing, and allow for the platform to move into the future and move with the times and not just be stuck in the times back then. But when I had looked at the requirements of the system, I automatically thought that ReShare was something that would be perfect, and reached out to Index Data pretty quickly. So the timeline itself, with a little bit of history of where things sort of sit in the interlibrary loan space in Australia and shared infrastructure. Back in the 1980s, CAVAL had actually helped out to build the Australian National Bibliographic Network, which was the ABN back in the day, and now has moved into the ANBD, which is the National Bibliographic Database. We then built in 1989 the Interlibrary Loan Service. It was a digital service. And then moved into using VDX in 1999, and VDX had been sitting as a system in Australia until 2025. We also made sure that we could integrate ISO-ILL functionality so that libraries that didn't run VDX could actually interoperate with the systems as well. So we used things like Relay, Alma towards the end, and other VDX systems as well. In 2022, a major landscape review was conducted to ensure that the service was still meeting the needs of the Australian libraries. And you could see in the sort of the graph there that the numbers were going down in interlibrary loans, but it was still deemed as an important service and was deemed something that we should be continuing on. So there was a whole tender process between 2022 and 2025. But VDX was retired in 2025 and we went live, but we can talk about that timeline later. So between 2022 and 2025, Seb Hammer came up with this wonderful sort of diagram in the tender document as to how we envisaged that ReShare would look in the Australian environment. But you can see here between 2022 and 2024, it was actually a really long process to go through with requests for expressions of interest. There was a tender that we had to submit to. There was 2 presentations and a very long wait between our last presentation and May when it was announced to us. We had actually thought, oh, well, we didn't actually win the tender, and sort of went off and did our own thing until suddenly got a call and went, oh, you know, can you meet with us for 15 minutes? And we went, oh, well, that's a sign that we're not going to get it. And turns out we actually got it and celebrated like crazy because it was unexpected that a national library would pick an open source solution in Australia. But what I might do is now hand over to Sean about the next pieces.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to excuse me, talk a bit more about the project and then move more into some of the technical details as to what we needed to build to accomplish this. So first of all, there were 3, I guess, slices of the project team. The first being the customer, so obviously Trove, specifically within Trove, TRS, which is the Trove Resources Sharing team. They had a wealth of institutional knowledge, and that idea of institutional knowledge or tribal knowledge is something that is very dear to me, and something that I'll talk a lot about on this slide. But the idea is that, you know, they had like a wealth of knowledge behind them around how libraries in Australia operate, around LAD, L-A-D-D, which was the VDX system, the name of the VDX system before Trove Partners Resource Sharing came about. They also have a wealth of knowledge around, just in general, around their user base and around document supply and things like that. They also bring to the project all the business rules. You know, they owned the tender, the process. So those business rules that were part of the tender were the guiding, I guess, points about how the end product should function. Then we have Index Data, who have over 30 years of experience in building open source solutions for libraries. Again, they have a wealth of knowledge around international trends around resource sharing and use cases. And then they also, and I think it's a really important thing, is that they wanted to enhance ReShare for the benefit of the wider user base around the world. So even though Trove had these business rules and these outcomes they wanted to accomplish, which required development, you could see that Index Data was wanting to build something that wasn't just sort of pigeonholed for Trove, for the Australian experience. They wanted to build upon ReShare for the betterment of everybody. Then we have the last, which is us, CAVAL. So we sort of saw ourselves as the translator between Trove and Index Data, sort of between the customer versus the developer. So I mean, we were meeting very, very regularly, individually. So CAVAL would meet with Index Data, CAVAL would be meeting with Trove, and then the three of us would be getting together as well. And as I said, as the translator, that kind of just means that developers speak going one way, and then maybe Australian interlibrary loan knowledge going the other way, and just trying to work out and just trying to make sure that each side understands where the other is coming from. Go to the next slide, Sarah. Thanks. So let's now move on to talking a bit more technical. I think especially around some technical terms that are kind of the foundation of what we had to build and achieve for this. So the first is this idea of tiers, which essentially is all about the cost of a transaction. What is a Trove partner being charged? Oh, sorry, what is a Trove partner charging to supply a request? And Sarah mentioned Trove partners earlier. Trove partners, instead of just calling them libraries, it's important to call them Trove partners, because it's not just libraries. It's museums, it's archives, it's government agencies, both at a state and federal level. It's also corporate entities as well that use the service. So it could be law firms as well, as an example. So all these Trove partners come together, and they really choose and they enroll themselves in one or more of these tiers. And so there's two tiers. There's the free tier, the reciprocal tier, and then there's also the paid tier, the pay for peer tier as well. Next on the list, we've got service levels, which are all about the speed of the request, the urgency as to when do you need it by. And essentially, the higher the cost, the faster the time that you get. So, and again, Trove partners enroll themselves in one or more of these. Next, we have request pools, which is essentially where the rubber hits the road, and it's a combination of the tiers and the service levels coming together, and it's what the partners choose when they're creating a new request within the system. And it's handy to note here that if a request does go unfilled in the particular pool that they choose, so it goes end of rota, the system then allows them to easily move to another pool and try again. And then lastly, we have this idea of networks, which are essentially subgroups of Trove partners within the system. And this is a really big central idea of how the system was supposed to function, because TPRS, Trove Partner Resource Services, is not something, it's not just one large sharing group with requests going each way and every way. It's actually a large group of subgroups that are all linked together, which is an important sort of point. So it's really a web of linked networks instead of one large network of sharing. providers. So Trove partners join one or more of these networks, and they're based on a range of factors such as, library type, possibly their geographical location, or the type of material or sources that they need to access. And so let's then take a closer look at the actual request pools. And I've sort of got this matrix up on the screen at the moment. There's two things to take note here, where the pricing comes from and also what we mean by aging. So pricing itself comes from a document that's been created by the Australian Library and Information Association, otherwise known as ALIA, which is the peak body for the sector in Australia. So ALIA's document, which is the Australian Interlibrary Resource Sharing Code, so that provides guidance on sort of interlibrary loan best practice, and it also includes pricing, a pricing model as well in there. The other thing to take note here is the idea of aging, which is the length of time a request sits with a potential supplier before the system automatically moves it on to the next possible supplier in the rota. So if you look at this matrix on the screen here, you can see, first of all, we've got the reciprocal tier at the top. That's the most simple one. So that only has the idea of a core service level in there. And you can see that it's broken down. The costs are broken down between loan, so physical shipping loans requests versus copy or digital requests in there as well. And you can see the aging there is about 3 days before it will automatically progress to the next participant in the rota. Then we've got the premium pools, and this is where it starts to get a bit more in depth here. Or interesting. So we can sort of see here that you've got core, rush, and express. They each have their own pricing structures. Again, loan and copy is separated out. And then you can also then see with the aging that as the aging reduces all the way down to only having an opportunity to respond in 2 hours for an express, the cost increases. Next slide. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks. So then next I'll talk a little bit about designing the networks. This is probably one of the most challenging problems to solve. It was kind of an ideological idea that the system would be broken down into all of these networks. And so there were a ton of meetings between the three of us, Trove, Index Data, and CAVAL, around how this would look, how they would function, how they'd be designed and implemented. And it did take a little bit of while to try and figure this out. But in the end, on a call between Trove and CAVAL, we kind of just went back to basics and just thought exactly, instead of getting too in depth, let's just sort of break it down and make some pretty basic rules that we can build upon. And that's what's on the screen at the moment. So first of all, rule one is that a library can be a member of one or more networks. Networks are not defined by regional library type, although they probably will be determined by these things based on the libraries themselves and the requirements. And then thirdly, libraries have control over the which networks they search and in which order, so the priority. So when we wrote this down, Sarah quickly scribbled up this very lovely drawing to sort of map out exactly what we meant by that. Essentially, the circles are the libraries, and then with the lines going between them are the networks, and then the I'm not sure if you'd even call them rectangles, the priorities that the libraries actually have. So based off this very beautiful diagram, I quickly mocked up this diagram, which kind of, look, maybe people may say it's a little bit clearer. I'm not sure, but it essentially you can sort of see here. So we've got on screen, there's 4 networks. You've still got the circles, which are the libraries. And so if we have a look at network 1, for instance, here, so that's got 4 members, library A, B, C, and D. Library B is also a member of network 2, with libraries E, F, and G. And then you've got D and C on the left-hand side, who share a network between networks 1 and 3. And then you've also got network 4, which has a group of Trove partners in there, but they don't actually share with the other networks. All right, next slide, please, Sarah. And so based off all of this work, we now had a clear picture of how the logic and the business rules would fit together. So starting from the ground up, if we just look at it from a library's perspective, we can say that a library is an entity that requests and responds. It's a member of one or more networks. It sets network priority, and it is enrolled in Trove service tiers. Then if we move up one level, we have networks, which is a named group of libraries. It facilitates targeted searching and sharing. It contains many libraries, and there's no limit to the membership size of a network. And then finally, if we go up to that consortium level, we see that a consortium contains many networks. It contains many libraries, and it contains all of the business logic, such as the pricing structures, the aging, those service tiers logic, and so forth. And then lastly, just to sort of demonstrate how the system works in a real world scenario, these are example networks that I'll show you, but the idea is the same. So we first of all have a university library. They're a member of networks. And Sarah, if you just click through, thanks. So they choose, so they're a member of 3 networks. They choose to search the CAVAL network first. If they do not find a response there, they move on to the higher education network. And after that, they move across to the national network. Then we have a metropolitan public library service. From here, they're a member of the Metro Publics network, which they'll search first. If they don't find it there, they'll sort of spread out a little bit more and go across to a statewide public network. And then they'll also, if they don't find anything there, maybe they'll go and search the national network as well. And straight away, we can see here that both a university and a public are sharing the same network. And then lastly, the last example is a health library, so a hospital or a statewide service. So they search maybe a statewide health network first, then they'll move on to the national health network, and then potentially maybe they'll go search a higher education network for the type of resources that they require. And that is it from me for the moment. I think at this point, I'm going to move on to Mallory.
Hey, thanks very much for the introductions and setting the stage, Sarah and Sean. I'm now going to dive into what the end product looks like, how we got here, the new functionality, well, some of the new functionality, and I'll briefly touch on the Alma and Rapido interoperability. So let's move on to how we got to all this fun stuff. Next slide, please. So once we wrapped our heads around the things that Sean just talked about, the concept of tiers, service levels, networks, we could start mapping out Trove's 2 main workflows. So the reciprocal and pay-for-peer request routing and the associated directory configurations to support that. And the tenant deployment process was heavily optimized to save time on rolling out these tenants, without any ILS or SSO integrations, no NSIP, staff are placing all of the requests. So for these 300 tenants, that's how we kind of rolled these out. And we used Google Sheets which you can see here, to capture each institution's tenant settings, what tiers they support, administrative details like system email address, time zone. And because of this directory setup, the implementation currently lacks like a full user interface, and all tenant configuration is handled by CAVAL and index data staff. We used GitHub automations to gather the configuration information and to drive the tenant creation process. And the system ingests tenant details from these Google Sheet batches and validates the data and generates a JSON file that's needed for the tenant implementation. And you can see the basic output that is generated from the Google Sheets here. I've just pulled a couple of screenshots, but for each tenant row, the system will check for missing required data in the first 4 columns. And then there are a lot of automated safety nets here. That is, we validate the NUC symbol. Sarah and Sean might have to correct me, but I think it's the National Union Catalog code. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Against the Trove API, we also do a fuzzy matching to verify that the tenant names that were provided match the NUC codes. And so this essentially serves as the basis for the directory for the production environment plus the test and dev environments as well. The file contains a complete list of all the tenants and their status. That is right now we're currently managing suspensions or closures by marking the reciprocal and pay for peer columns as no, so that they can't get added to the rota. If you mind skipping to the next slide, I want to highlight the results of the automated workflow. The system runs several GitHub action workflows twice daily. So there's a main workflow that processes all the batches and updates those data files. There's one to monitor for processing errors, and it will fail if any are found. We check for those duplicate tenant entries, and we track batches that have been delivered. And that essentially means like someone at CAVAL has relayed information into a new batch, but that they haven't been acknowledged yet. So we can stage things before we ever push them up and deploy the tenants. And also there's an automated process for generating logos for the full ReShare tenants. As of last week, there had been 653 total workflow runs. Some were those twice daily scheduled ones, some ad hoc. Right now, there are 44 active batch worksheets. Some only have like one institution, some have many, some have dev or test tenants. But we've obtained 475 addresses. There's 43 available networks, and we have configured 352 of them. So I don't know, lots of fun stuff going on here to, automated stuff to get the support for this large of a rollout. So now that we understand how the tenants are created, I'll briefly touch on the workflow. It's a little unique. I think Sean talked a little bit about this, but in this case, the requester is a staff member. As a reminder, there's no patrons yet, no ILS or NSIP integrations, and they'll take the request and search the ANBD where libraries have added their holdings. And they will submit a request from ReShare or Alma with a specific ANBD record ID. If they're a ReShare user, they'll hit the Where Are You From form and be directed to the ILL patron request form within ReShare with the ANBD ID and metadata filled in via a deep link. This ANBD record ID is the starting point for the rota building logic. Holdings for the desired material are retrieved from the ANBD using Z39.50. Each holding organization is associated with their library record from that directory that we built to determine their tier and network memberships. Only holdings where the borrower and potential lender share networks and memberships are considered, but they must also match on service type and level before load balancing is applied within a network. For the Trove implementation, the ReShare tenants were extended with an external routing mode where they can pass requests to the crosslink broker using ISO 18626. This creates a list of suppliers and relays messages. And this method allowed us to support Trove's complex request routing rules, and it added the ability to message between ReShare, Alma, and Rapido users who would have configured a broker resource sharing partner. I'll now move on to highlight some of the new features we've added as part of the Trove implementation. We introduced support for the pay-for-peer tier, where requests are submitted with a cost based on the Australian ILRS code. And this fee is determined by a combination of service type and level. A key workflow component was for the Trove libraries to be able to negotiate different costs. So perhaps the supplier could provide the requested item, but not at the rush or express a timeline. And so they might want to know if the requester would accept it at the core timeline and price. And so the cost can be adjusted up or down, but not lower than the minimum cost setting. And cost negotiations are handled with conditional responses in ReShare, as shown here on the right. I also just highlighted that we've added a has cost filter to easily identify requests that are in the paid tier. And they also have that little $ symbol. Moving on to the file upload service, we added a shared document stash to support document delivery without having an external service. And you can simply click the file upload button. And while we haven't limited to like the file type, we do have a max file size enforced. Suppliers can still fill via URL if they prefer. And I'll just note from this screen that we've also added conditions for service type copy. And one more exciting thing is that we've added the ability to set a default due date for libraries that don't use NSIP like Trove. So this due date is calculated based on the number of days configured in the settings, and we display the calculated default due date. And staff have the option to alter it prior to checking it into ReShare and shipping. And shifting gears a bit, I'll talk about the interoperability between ReShare and Alma using the Crosslink broker. As mentioned earlier, the broker needs to be configured as a resource sharing partner in Rapido and Alma, and this allows their users to submit requests to the broker that can then locate match suppliers within TPRS. There's lots of great documentation that was put together by Alan Jones and the CAVAL and Trove staff. That's a screenshot of the partner configuration. I also want to note that we rely heavily on messaging and notes to make up for differences in the protocol implementations. But one fun thing is the emojis that come through. So I threw that one in there. And then moving on, you can see in the next screen that notes push the addresses in. So that's over on the right-hand side. And document URLs are also relayed that way. But we also use the chat pane in ReShare to send conditions to Alma and Rapido requesters. Sorry, I'm trying to be quick here. If we go on to the next one, I just want to mention that in Alma, pull slips and shipping slips are taken from the directory entry instead of the message. But since the entire network is a partner entry, the broker in this case, and not individual libraries, the shipping and return addresses are put into notes instead of the slips. So the processor can then properly address packages. There's documentation on how to adjust your letters to capture the information. That's also from that Ex Libris documentation that I mentioned earlier. I think I'm probably over time, but I just want to give a huge shout out to like everyone involved in the interoperability work, Ex Libris and their team, the IDS and Crosslink team. Tim Jackson did a lot of testing with me. Alan did a ton of testing. Trove and CAVAL did a ton of testing. And I just want to thank everyone. My DevOps team and the developers did excellent work. So it was a massive team effort. I'm going to hand it back to Sean now.
Cool. Thanks, Mallory. All right. So just around go live then, the actual go live period lasted about 15 weeks. And for the initial cohort of partners to go live, Sarah and I traveled to Canberra, and that was around in mid-May. And we sort of set ourselves up in a meeting room with the Trove team. That's the photo on the right-hand side, and sort of had lollies and sweets and stuff, kind of just waiting to bunker ourselves down for the impending doom of like triaging problems that were obviously going to occur. And it was all just very anticlimactic. The system just hummed along, really. So basically, if we have a look at the table that's at the top of the screen there, just to sort of give an idea as to sort of what was going on and how we sort of got everyone live. So as I said, so we were there in mid-May for those direct access go lives. And so direct access are those libraries that are using the ReShare interface to manage their resources. And so at the same time, that's when the reciprocal tier went live. And so there was about 290 tenants or partners that went live during that 2-week period. And then if we fast forward into July, that's when those Alma and Rapido libraries went live. There's about 36 of those, and those were kind of dispersed across those 6 weeks period. So there was a lot more hand-holding per library, and so they sort of went in much smaller chunks just to sort of manage, because they had to obviously do some work on their side, some configuration setups in the Alma and Rapido systems as well, just to make sure that everything was working. And then the pay for peer tier went live at the start of August. And then really just maybe you got some questions about how the system's currently going. So we thought we'd sort of pull a range of stats together. So the system itself at the moment is about 4 months old at the time of this presentation. And just to sort of handpick some of the stats that are on the screen at the moment is that, so yeah, there's about 1,200 end user accounts. So these are staff that are at the partners using the system, and that's across about 350 Trove partners that are currently participating in the service. And that number's slowly creeping up and changing as others join. Predominantly, the system is being used for physical loans requests over digital requests, but I think that's starting to shift slightly in the trends. And the reciprocal requests far outweigh the pay for peer requests as well. But that said, you saw on the slide just previously that pay for peer has only been live for less than half the time of reciprocal requests. So it'll be interesting to see how that trend continues. And then in terms of turnaround times, so on average, we're under 2 days for a digital copy request to be shipped to a library or to a partner. And then for physicals, it's around about 8 days for an item to be sourced and shipped. So that's it from me. I think I might be passing it back on to Mallory.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about some ideas that we're likely to pursue in the future. You know, the directory may need to be fleshed out and have some sort of UI component that can be used by staff so that they can manage their tiers and networks. Likewise, we are developing a streamlined way to handle holiday and ad hoc closures, and this may someday be folded into the directory as well. We'd also like to pull broker-located suppliers directly into the tenant UI, perhaps also adding the ability to see potential suppliers in other tiers. So in the event that you want or need to submit a revised request, you would know maybe how likely that would be. And we'll continue to work on interoperability as other systems make changes and in coordination with the next version of the ISO 18626 protocol. I'll just make a quick shout out to the Beyond the Walled Garden presentation from yesterday. So if you want to catch a recording of that, you can get a little bit of a deeper dive into the protocol and interoperability supported by Crosslink. And Sarah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the last bullet there.
Yeah, so this is I guess, a way in the future thing, and it's a big picture aim for us is to actually look at the potential for international connectivity with other reshare builds, but also with other resource sharing systems. So the importance of this project was to make sure that we use the ISO 18626 protocol heavily and made sure that we could ensure equity and access amongst all libraries and not just having a degraded service using different methods. And so we decided to use a very standards-based approach. And it was very important to the National Library and to CAVAL and index data to make sure that we stuck with the ISO protocol as much as possible. I did also want to say that this project is very much values driven, and it was immense fun to actually conduct this project. And we wanted to make sure that this sort of fun was shared amongst the world as well, to actually show that an IT project can be fun and you can actually learn from it and grow as a team. And as Mallory said, just a shout out to everyone that contributed to this project. And thank you so much to the ReShare community for providing so much insight and just friendship in actually implementing something this large. I hopefully think that this will become a standard for other national services to potentially set up something like this to offer a more open-based solution. So hopefully in the future that this will actually set a nice standard for future projects. But with that, we'd like to thank you. This is actually a pretty cool graph of the stats that kind of happen and the requests that have come through since we started the project. But here's some extra information if you need it, and please feel free to contact us. But is there any questions?
There was one in chat directed at Sean. I think it was during your section, but it says, are these mediated requests or unmediated or somewhere in between?
Yeah, thank you. So they're all mediated. So yeah, it's all staff driven.
But the
I would say,
unmediated bit is the distribution of the requests, right?
Yeah, that's right. I guess it depends where the question is coming from, I guess. I would say that there's also potential for a next, like the next step for this system, which is around a public tier to allow the public to use the Trove interface. If you haven't seen Trove itself, I suggest you Google it and have a look at it. But to actually use that interface to find resources anywhere in Australia and to create an interlibrary loan request for that item themselves.
So I invite anyone to unmute themselves that is online, and I'm scanning the room for anyone here raising their hands.
Yes, here's Stefan from Berlin.
Hello.
Hello. We are looking very, very close to and very, very curious for the Australian solution from Germany, as we are also looking for a next generation system for our interlibrary loan. So Germany has a very elaborated interlibrary loan system. It's a little bit aged. We are running it since 25 years now, and it's based on OCLC ZFL server, which is from the architecture is very much like that what ReShare is doing. And so my question is, how do the direct connected libraries work with the system? Do they all have a kind of mini folio or some or a special app, or is this clustered and they connect directly to the ReShare database?
They connect directly through to the ReShare database, so there is the ability to log in as a library. Each of the staff members get their own login to a specific URL that's linked to their library, and they'll be able to go in and create a blank request, or they can create a request that's linked to the external database.
Okay, okay. And in term, so there is just so they share all the same technical infrastructure.
Correct.
It's all on one, or it's all on a small number of servers.
Correct.
And there is no there's no ISO request between the client and the the ReShare core.
Not at this point in time, no. But there
Okay.
there is the opportunity to be able to do that, though.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
I think just on that, so yeah, there's no NSIP or any other type of technology integrating back to the partner's own library management system. It's all just housed within ReShare.
Yeah, so okay, this is, but in Germany it's also the typical situation. So we have in interlibrary alone we have roughly 3,500 libraries taking part. So they and I think there are just 500 system libraries which are connected to the library system, and we have a roughly 100 who do very heavy ILL.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's it. And I think it sounds similar. And also the proportion of actual like fully integrated libraries, especially from the previous system as well, where it's really just the universities have the software and the infrastructure that actually allows them to integrate, especially with the new ISO 18626 standard. Yeah.
yeah, so for us, we will, as we have all library systems in Germany suppose the OCLC standard, so we have to do a converter to make, or would have to do a converter who just transfers the NSIP messages, the so-called SNMP messages, to make life to make the conversion or the transition to make it much easier. Thank you.
Nice.
I am not seeing anything in the room.
So will you provide the slides?
Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
okay, definitely. Thanks. And best greetings to Alan Jones, who I met just in Siena.
Not sure if Alan saw the group photo that we photoshopped him into.
He says he saw it, yes.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I think this might be one of the last sessions of the conference. So thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks all.
And have a good morning.
Yes.
Will do. Thanks all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.